Speaking to be heard, elements of an effective argument. So you previously worked through the Bob situation and came up with some arguments for him. And with your class, you talked about the different aspects of those arguments you made that made them either stronger or not as strong. So you've already listed out some of those things. A lot of these things will probably be reflected in what I'm saying here, but I'm going to run through some really key pieces to remember when you are making an argument and being effective about it and speaking to be heard while making an argument. And then you're going to practice this one more time by cleaning up the argument you made for Bob to make sure you're taking into account each of these pieces. And then you will later use these pieces in different situations. So I'm going to walk through them now. So the first element of an effective argument, and making sure that when you're arguing you're speaking to be heard, is time and place. And the key question here, right, is this a good place and time to be heard? So if you're looking at this picture, right, like if you're trying to have an argument, right, or a disagreement and be heard for real and get full attention from the person you're talking to, maybe walking through a really crowded mall is not the best place because it'll be hard to hear, etc., right? In the situation of Bob, right, again, time and place, well, maybe in the middle of class is not the best time or place. Usually, if we're talking about a disagreement with one person, being private and talking to them away from others is probably a good idea. And time-wise, selecting a time when they have the ability to focus on you is also very important. So that is what we mean by time and place. The next aspect or element of an effective argument is preparation. The question is, have you done your research? And what I mean by this is, obviously, if you're doing an academic argument, this means literally, have you done your research? Have you found all the information you need to know? Are you well knowledgeable about what you're talking about? In the case of an argument with somebody else that you want to hear you out, the preparation is similar, though, as have you done the background research? Have you gotten an understanding of what is going on? Have you asked the right questions from people around the situation to know what's going on? So in the case of Bob, you can think about what kind of preparation he might do before having a conversation with his teacher to better understand the situation. Because again, when we're in a situation, we might only see half the story or even less. So preparation in the case of, again, having a disagreement or an effective argument with somebody else is figuring out what their side of the story is, what else was going on, to make sure that you're not just coming in and talking about something that either didn't happen or only from your point of view. So make sure you're prepared. And again, if you're going to make some claims about things that the other person did, make sure you're right about them. All right. The next piece of an effective argument is credibility. And what credibility means is, can you be believed? Are you trustworthy? Can someone believe that you speaking actually makes sense, that you're someone to listen to? Right? And one part of credibility is, are you honestly acknowledging their points, the other person's points? And what I mean by this is, there are multiple versions of the truth. There's always at least two sides, usually more. And if you're not acknowledging that, then you're instantly losing your credibility, because as someone that you're arguing against, I'm not going to take you seriously because you're clearly not even open to listening and you haven't done your homework, right? Which goes back to preparation. So credibility starts with acknowledging the other person's point, right? Acknowledging that the other person actually knows what they're talking about and they have some valid reasons to feel the way they did or to act the way they did. So for example, with Bob, perhaps in his situation he's yelling at the teacher, right? They might have a very legitimate reason, if they're getting yelled at, to respond by getting him in more trouble. So starting off by acknowledging that is a good way to get somebody to actually listen to you when you're making an argument. Another piece of credibility is, do you have strong evidence? Again, it goes back to preparation. Did you do your research? Right? So again, you cannot come into an argument and expect anyone to take you seriously or find you credible if you do not have strong evidence. So again, making sure you're doing your research in a situation of a conversation with one other person, that you're not just speaking from your own personal opinion alone, that you actually have some other evidence, maybe something somebody else said, or even better, some factual piece of evidence with you that shows what happened. So maybe you can cite, in the case of Bob, right, maybe there's a situation when the exact same thing happened before, someone was taking their time, and they did not get in as big of trouble, right? That would be a piece of evidence, as long as, again, it is strong and it is the kind of thing that the other side is not really going to argue with you about. Because if you just bring in one more thing that makes people more angry or less credible in a situation, then again, it doesn't really help you. So credibility also pertains to having strong evidence. Another piece of good argumentation is emotion. And really what that means is starting with the fact that yours need to be under control. So if I come in there, I'm screaming at someone, I'm really angry, and I'm not controlling myself, I'm not using my coping skills to take deep breaths or calm down, then all that's going to happen is up the emotions of the other person I'm talking to. So if I'm making the person that I'm talking to mad, am I really speaking to be heard? No, because they're not going to be in a situation and able to listen to you. So on top of everything else, you need to make sure you're controlling your emotions and using them in a way that is helpful. So if I'm just tapping into anger and screaming and yelling, that's just going to put someone off. They will not hear me. However, maybe if being angry is what motivates me to have the conversation in the first place, but then I control myself in the situation and don't get the other person all riled up, then perhaps I am actually speaking to be heard. Final piece of emotion, and really the last of these sort of basic elements of a good argument, is, are you appealing to the other person's needs? And what that means is, again, are you really thinking about the other side? Are you making sure that what you're talking about actually has something to do with them? So one example, again, if we're talking about Bob, is if I'm talking to the teacher and I don't want to be in trouble. One, I will acknowledge their viewpoint by saying, hey, yes, you're right, I was out of my seat. But on top of that, if I'm appealing to the other person's needs, maybe I know, hey, I know it's important to you to have a classroom where people aren't wandering around, right? Now here's how I can address that for you, and here's either how I was trying to help or how I will help in the future, right? Again, if you're trying to help that other person out and you're being honest and acknowledging where they're coming from, again, they're going to be much more likely to hear you and move with you from there. So now it is your turn, right, to come up with a more effective argument for Bob. Right? So I've given you some hints throughout this, but you're going to go through a worksheet that has each of these different pieces, and you're going to make sure that you come up with an extremely effective argument for Bob. And in practicing this, you're going to get yourself ready for coming up with your own effective argument for something that matters to you. So good luck.